Okay, crowded room. Thanks, everybody. Sorry, I'm 10 minutes behind. Had a meeting run over and I couldn't get out of it, which I'll talk about what that meeting was about, actually, as part of our Talent for Tomorrow initiative. We had our consultants in today. And since we're paying them by the hour, I wanted to get them going. So we're paying you by the hour too, but different story. So thank you guys for being here today. Excited for another all staff. We're in a new room. This room Doler has recently put together for meetings like this. We used it a couple weeks ago and was really happy. We all feel real tall when we're in this room, so I think it works out good, and our comms team seems to be okay with it. So we're going to dive in today. We will have a guest, as you saw on the agenda. The guest today will be Commissioner Zora Mulligan with the Department of Higher Education. So I'm going to burn through my stuff so we can be ready for her. She'll be here about 10:30. There's a few on the other side of the wall I'll have to move around for. So kind of jumping in, I just wanted to, I thought it might be good for all of us to always remember what we're here for, right? And so talking a little bit about our strategic placemats, we talk about them a lot. We had a lot of energy when we were putting them together, but there's a group that meets monthly with the department, and they talk about the department's strategic placemat and strategic initiatives, and then we meet kind of weekly when I show up with the strategy and planning team, and we talk about our initiatives, and then the idea is we intertwine these to all the work we're doing. And so I thought it might be nice this morning to go back through these again and just refresh ourselves, and then just kind of talk about how we can continue to intertwine these in our daily activities. So why are we here? We know the mission, and the mission will continue to be to create more jobs, increase wages for Missourians, and be best in Midwest. We know there's changes in the administration. Many of you have been through this before. Admittedly, I have not. This will be my first transition. But I will say yesterday that Director Dixon received a call from incoming Governor Parson, has confirmed his commitment to the work we're doing with economic and workforce development. Economic workforce development will remain a priority of the incoming administration, and we've all been asked to stay on and stay in our roles. So sorry to say you're stuck with us a little longer, but we're going to continue moving full steam ahead on these issues, and we're real excited about that. So the mission stays the same, right? How do we help Missourians? How do we create more jobs, increase wages, and become best in Midwest? Kind of how we do that, and kind of what our overall strategic aspiration, and again, this is, you guys have this in the traditional format, but for the slide I just kind of wanted to lay out the high points. Really, it's all about that cultivating resiliency, and I think you're going to start hearing me talk more and more about, and some of you already have, but talk about specifically resiliency as the outcome that we see here. How do we cultivate resiliency in Missouri's labor market? And that includes the whole ecosystem, right? That's education, that's workforce development, that's training, that's employment. It's all these pieces coming together with the goal of really helping Missouri become more resilient. How do we be more dynamic and flexible? How do we better respond to shifts, accelerations, changes in our economy and our labor market, so that both the unemployed, the underemployed, our businesses, and our incumbent workers are resilient, productive, sustainable in their roles. And so we're going to do that, we hope, by focusing on these key pillars of transforming Missouri's public workforce system. We're really, a lot of work has already happened around that. We're focusing on more of a strategy orientation. We're trying to figure out how to better integrate with our core partners. And we're going through the Best Midwest process and Talent for Tomorrow, which ties these in. Developing Missouri's talent, that's a laser focus of what we've been doing for years, of helping individuals obtain sustainable employment, but taking it to that next step of not just providing them services when they come in the door of our job centers, but how do we help them after they're employed? How do we help them continue to identify and access training and certification and different opportunities to become more resilient? How do we help our employers become more productive and sustainable? And so really thinking of it in a more holistic approach. That ties into growing Missouri's businesses, and then transforming our public workforce agency. Again, we've talked a lot about that as well. A lot of that's already been done, but just empowering and using, empower in the word of not just the training program, but just the idea of aligning these things and empowering each of you to do the work that you are here to do, that you're passionate about doing, and to do it in a way that helps achieve this larger strategic goal of cultivating resiliency. And then empowering Missouri's communities. What do we mean by that? Really, we're just talking about how does Missouri become stronger? Our communities are our people. We have 31 job centers. We have 14 workforce regions, 10 economic regions. We are in Missouri's communities. We're a key part of Missouri's communities. How do we better connect with that? How do we connect stronger with our local boards and our local centers and just help embolden the communities and the people in those communities? And so really, this is how I think Missouri can become resilient. I think Missouri will have an outcome of a resilient labor market. And I think the key is, too, this is not something that you achieve or that you check off and then you relax. You know, the challenge to this is an ongoing process. And so we have to work hard every day to make sure that we're not just cultivating resiliency, but we're sustaining that resiliency and that we're preparing ourselves for what's next. And so these things are always going to be ongoing. It's not oh, there's something wrong, so we need to fix it, and then we'll be okay. It's really the focusing on coming into work every day and understanding what are the tactical things that we need to do, what are the technical things that we need to do to accomplish, to achieve the grander strategic vision, and then what are some of the more strategic and systematic type things that we need to focus on. And we all have different roles, and we'll all play different parts there, but to use the cliche context of a football team, it takes the full team. It takes each player doing their position well for the team to win. And I think that's exactly what we have here. We all have unique roles and responsibilities, but when we each do that, and we do that extremely well, then we're going to be unstoppable. We're going to be a great resource, and we're going to cultivate that resiliency. And that's happening every day. I've seen it now for almost 8 months, and I'm just proud to be a part of it. And I'm proud and really excited about doing more to unleash and unlock that creative potential that each of you have and that each of you are putting out there each day. So that's what's going on. Just a reminder, nothing new. I will say something neat that's going to happen, hopefully in the next week or so, is you're going to start seeing monitors put up all around the office, central office. And these monitors are going to have about 10 or 12 slides that just continuously run. And they're going to have our strategic placemat. They're going to have our dashboards, our performance metrics, both WIOA and these new metrics that we're working to identify with the strategy and planning unit that are beyond WIOA. Some of the work that Clinton has been doing, some of the work that the JobStat team has been doing, some of the work that strategy planning team has been doing. But putting these up so we'll have these monitors in front of us each day so we can all see these things, be reminded of these things, and be aware of these things and see our progress. And so I'm real excited. I know June 1st is tomorrow. That was kind of our big rollout of putting this, but making these things visual so we all have a part of it. And then we can start scratching our head and asking the questions, well, why is this data point maybe this? Why is it that only the data shows only 59% of the people that come into a job center find employment on the other side? Maybe it's a data issue, maybe it's a programming issue, maybe it's a system issue, maybe it's everything. But how do we come together and identify these things? So we'll be looking at these things on a very routine basis. Empower update, just we're going to always talk about Empower. Empower is blazing forward. Again, we're at May 31st, July 1st, we do the full rollout. But the Trailblazers cohort has been rolled out and is underway, and they're doing a great work to kind of design and position the curriculum in a way that will be ready for rollout to the Job Center specialists in July. And it's a 32-hour block of training will be rolled out for all field staff beginning around July 1st or after July 1st. And they'll be doing 2 16-hour blocks, and I believe those will be complete by the end of September, where all field staff have gone through and obtained their 32-hour certification for our field staff. In addition to that, we kicked off yesterday the executive leadership team, which consists of your assistant directors and your strategy planning manager. And tomorrow we'll add a new person to that also. But that's basically our core leadership team here. They're going through their first certification, which would be the Leadership Challenge certification, where they're doing a Leadership Challenge project to help them empower themselves so they can turn around and empower each of you and develop their leadership. And then the DWD leaders, which is everyone from a band 1 and up, will be going through the process of the Six Sigma Greenbelt training that will be happening beginning in late July and into August. And so it'll be a 6-week training program where we'll all get Lean Six Sigma training. And then we'll actually begin to filter that out into our coordinators after that initial time. And then Dave is rolling out the innovation teams, and I'm working on finalizing some announcements that are going to come soon on workforce coordinator certification, which will be also rolled out in July. So a lot of this is coming to head. The Empower team is really busy. The Trailblazer team is really busy, and everyone's doing some really exciting work to get this prepared. And a lot of hard work I know has gone into the Job Center specialist certification rollout. But it's important to know that we're doing this, as I said, from A to Z. There's multiple cohorts with multiple levels going through different training programs all at the same time. And the idea is we're all going through some form of Empower so that we can come out on the other side. And again, not be done, but this continuous learning, continuous opportunity to improve our skill sets and make sure we have the resources we need to achieve our mission, our strategic objectives. We love to have recognition at these events, so we're going to do that here next. A few people that I have on the list, and I'm sure that some of the assistant directors will maybe have some other comments, but some things that made it to my desk. There's this person named Tammy Floyd, who I've known a long time, and I'm excited to recognize her work today. And Tammy has been working on a rollout of a new database and system that our community colleges use, and our technical colleges and a couple of the career technical high schools, but basically for the Missouri Works programs, customized training, other projects. There's this animal called IRTA, and as someone who used to use IRTA, it is an animal. But Tammy has done a great job in corralling and herding all the cats and working through a new rollout and a new process. And so I just want to please join me in thanking Tammy for her hard work and dedication on that project. A member of our comms team, Tara Mortz, has been doing a lot of projects with DED. She has been helping with some department-wide communication strategies and really doing a lot of work to incorporate the work of our communications team with Best in Midwest. And so I just wanted to recognize Tara and say thanks to Tara. I don't see Tara. There she is. Good. Right in front of me. New contact. Good. Danielle Bryant also has been working to help with Talent for Tomorrow and really has been our logistics specialist that has put together some playbooks and setting up these meetings. As I'm going to get into Talent for Tomorrow in a minute, you'll see there's a lot going on with Talent for Tomorrow, and I'm really appreciative of Danielle Bryant and her work that she's done to help us with corralling the leaders, which can be cats as well, and there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen on this one, and she holds us all together. So thanks to Danielle for her work and continued work on that. So yesterday I signed a pretty important policy guidance that I'm extremely proud of. Thanks for Rez and his team and others that were involved in this process, but we've gone through and we're beginning to rescind some really pedantic, unnecessary rules that put a lot of burden on our staff as well as our local partners. And so yesterday we removed some plan modifications, local plan modifications. We've rescinded some rules about reallocating funding between different programs, youth, dislocated worker, adult programs. And the idea there is just to get back to some common sense work and focus on how do we reduce burdensome activity and focus on outcomes. And so thanks to Steve and the whole QA team for diving deep into, I call it the Green Book, but the big WIOA law, and really understanding what are our policies and how can we create some efficiency there. So thanks to QA for their work on that. Of course, training team and TSU have been extremely busy with Empower. And so we're going to always be thanking them because they're running 100 miles an hour and they're collaborating in a way that is a bit unique, honestly. And collaboration isn't always clean and easy. We even inside our own divisions and departments, sometimes it's hard to pull us together because we have our specific focus, and sometimes it's hard to zoom back out and understand how do these two things connect. But I'm real proud of the work and the ongoing work of the training unit and TSU with Empower. So thanks to them for their work on that, and that's going to be continuing to move forward. So thanks to TSU and training. Our comms team has just continued to evolve and grow and change. You see them around the room now. We've done a lot of external events. They've been gobbled up. I'm having to fight back against DED because their work is getting so well noticed that they're now being incorporated into a lot of DED's communication work, which is wonderful, but with that becomes an extra strain on their availability. And so, but this is the most professional unit that I've ever worked with in any setting, and they come to these events and then they do their work, they prepare, and then they leave the events and they do their the post-event work and get their final products out the door in a quick and professional way. And so I'm very impressed and just I love the comms team and can't say thanks enough to their work. So. Next thing I want to recognize is the outstanding. There's a box there, but the Outstanding Service to Veterans awardees. And so this is a project each year that we are able to award. And I want to actually have Lisa come up and talk a little bit about this and maybe announce the awardees on this.
Thank you. I don't know if everybody knows, but every year our Jobs for Veterans State Grant allows us to set aside a small portion of our funds to recognize staff for providing services to veterans. It doesn't have to be vet staff, it could be any staff. So we take nominations every year, and we call it the Outstanding to Veterans Award. So this year we had 6 nominations. We have 4 winners. Those are Roger Brisley from Columbia, Stephanie Kirk from Arnold, Bob Gaines from Clinton, and Alicia Eckert from Chillicothe.
Hi. Facility people, Jim, I see you back there. Chuck, James, oh, I think he's off today. And Stephen, I don't see him either. But anyway, they did a fantastic job moving St. Joe, getting everything cleared out of there, getting everything moved over to the new location. Spent countless hours in St. Joe trying to get that achieved in a short time period. So I thank you guys for that. Also Lisa Johnson. Where's Lisa? Oh, Lisa achieved her NCDA certification, which is necessary for Empower. We're using that national certification for Empower, so she just achieved that. So we'd like to recognize her for that as well. That's all I have.
Can't say thanks enough to our team. We do great stuff, and I think it's important that we pause and we celebrate those wins. And there's no such thing as a small win. Everything's important. Everything we do each day, right? We have a job to do. We come, we do it. But it's important that we recognize that these things have meaning and they are important. And so there's so many things here that don't get recognized or that go untold. And you know, it's not that they're not important. I think that they are important. So 2 things I ask. 1, I want to hear about these things so we can recognize them more formally. Don't be modest. These are important. But also just know that we do appreciate the work, genuinely appreciate the work you do, and that it does, you know, it may go unspoken, but it doesn't go unnoticed for sure. Okay, so with that, also we have some new team announcements, and so if each assistant director wants to come back up here real quick, unless you don't have any changes in your teams, but if there's any new changes that have happened, I know there's going to be some changes in June, but are there any announcements? Anybody? I'm getting head shake. Come on up, Tracy. Anybody else add anybody?
Stephanie, where are you? Oh, there you are. Way in the back is Stephanie Runkle. She comes to us from Revenue, and before that with the State Auditor's Office and the Boys and Girls Club. She'll be the lead monitor now on the financial side, so we all welcome Stephanie and good luck.
Thank you. Great. Welcome. Anybody else who needs recognized? So I know in June we're going to see some new team members, so probably the next all staff will have a few new faces. And our team's growing and we're expanding. You know, it's great to continue to move people around internally, but it's also great to bring in new individuals from the outside to help us grow, because we have to keep doing the work, and if we just keep moving things around, we're still all trying to keep up with the same flow of work. So we sometimes have to grow to accommodate that. I'm excited to announce that effective tomorrow, but really unofficially today, I've created a new position called the Workforce Engagement and Innovation Director. And it's a really big, fancy, long title, but it's actually a very well described title. This person will actually do just that, focus on engagement and innovation with Missouri's public workforce system. And really what we're doing here is we're formalizing with the WIOA steering committee, with the WIOA state plan teams, with the different state agencies, the 4 state agencies and the 19 partners, and we're bringing that into a hub, if you will, and having a quarterback or a champion who will fight for those things every day and help us really work on our interagency projects, be a leader on some statewide initiatives and expansionary projects with grants and other things, and be a key part of our executive leadership team. So I couldn't think of a better person for this job than someone named Yvonne Wright. And so some of you might know Yvonne. I don't know how you don't if you don't, but she's an awesome lady. I've got to know Yvonne for a number of years now, but Yvonne comes with us with 24 years of experience at Missouri Vocational Rehabilitation. So we really, and she has been a key champion for WIOA and has been truly living the spirit of WIOA for a number of years. And so it's a great opportunity for us and a big win for us to bring Yvonne over. Yvonne has wonderful credibility across the state. Everyone really likes her. I joke that she epitomizes Switzerland and being the neutral party that everyone will come together and work with, and she doesn't have an agenda. And I think that she's going to be a great person to kind of build the hub and work and develop these and cultivate these relationships across the state. We're doing great stuff, and if we talk to our friends anywhere from reentry to Department of Agriculture to TANF and SNAP and Skill Up and with apprenticeships, and one thing I've learned real quick is we're all chasing after the same goals, and we're all, there might be 6 or 7 apprenticeship programs across 6 or 7 state agencies, and what we want to be very careful of is to not outcrowd ourselves and to not create redundancy that is inefficient. And so it's really important that we truly build this hub and spokes model and plug in and connect all these great things that our different agencies and our different partners are doing across the state that are both part and connected to WIOA, but as you hear me say all the time, beyond WIOA, right? The projects that we're doing, the programs we're doing to truly cultivate resiliency in Missouri's labor market. So Yvonne is here today, and so if Yvonne, if you'll stand up so everybody can see you. So if you don't know Yvonne, you're going to get to know her real soon, and I'm thrilled for Yvonne to join the team. Officially starts tomorrow, but I think she's going to hang out with us today, and it's just an honor to have Yvonne on the team. I'm real proud of it. So good. So the next thing that we'll move into will be Commissioner Mulligan. So, and then after Commissioner Mulligan, since I was late, I'm going to go back in and do another presentation. But I want to let Commissioner Mulligan come on up. And so just to introduce her, she's responsible for leading the Missouri Department of Higher Education. She previously served as Chief of Staff for the University of Missouri System, Executive Director of the Missouri Community College Association, Assistant Commissioner and General Counsel for the Missouri Department of Higher Education, and Assistant Attorney General to the Missouri Attorney General's Office. A native of West Plains, Missouri, that's our South Central region, Zora holds a bachelor's degree in political science and psychology from Drury College and a master's degree in education and Juris Doctorate from, I have to say, University of Kansas. So, without further ado, welcome Commissioner Mulligan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I apologize for my casual attire. I've been on vacation for a week. As Marty mentioned, I did work for the University of Missouri System. I was there for the transition in the president and the chancellor. That picture was taken when I started that job. I always joke that it's the before picture. This is after. This is what you experience when you go through as much stress as was associated with that turnover. I'm not an expert in traumatic transitions, but I can tell you they're hard, and it takes a lot more time than most people realize to really recover fully. So I think it's going to be a very interesting time to be leading here in the state of Missouri, and I am grateful for the shared work that we've already undertaken and have underway that I think is going to do a lot to get us through. Okay, so in the community college world, it's a little bit easier to talk about workforce development because those institutions are so closely connected to their local workforce investment boards. They're so focused on training for particular kinds of occupations. Now that I work again with all of the institutions, including the public four-year institutions and the private schools, it's a little bit harder to talk about workforce development because just having a bachelor degree is not something that everybody regards as a good preparation for the workforce. But I'm here to argue argue that it is, that we need lots and lots of different kinds of credentials. So the basic question I was going to ask, with you guys here today is college worth it? Marty wanted me to talk a little bit about what the Department of Higher Education does, and I'll try to do that as we go through it. But I thought this conversation might also be of interest to you who spend all of your work time trying to get people into meaningful work. So is college worth it? I guess you would say I have to say this because it's my job to, but I think the answer is very clearly yes. College is still worth it. We hear pretty regularly in the media reports about students who have a hard time finding jobs right after they graduate from school, particularly if they have a bachelor's degree, maybe if they just have a bachelor's degree in a liberal arts area. There is a pretty common perception that that degree might not be that worth it, and what everybody should really be doing is trying to get some more technical training. But what we find is the more education you have, the better you do in life. So, when you look at the kind of the calculus and you ask, is the time and money spent on getting a degree worth it? When you weigh it against the knowledge that people acquire in post-secondary education, personal development, health benefits, employability, earnings, there are data around each of these that indicate that it really is a good choice for lots of people to go to college. And I don't just mean a four-year institution. I mean any kind of post-secondary education. So if you look at it in terms of earnings, very clearly, people who have degrees after the high school level earn more money over the course of their lifetime. They also, like I said, there are also a lot of data about, they vote more, they live longer, they have generally better health outcomes. So generally, college is worth it from that perspective. It's for that reason that we have a goal at the Department of Higher Education. We want to have 60% of Missourians, working age Missourians, have a degree or certificate by 2025. We're making pretty steady progress toward that goal, but we still have a long way to go. So the number has increased from year to year. I'll tell you candidly that part of the reason the number has increased has been demographics. For several years, we had growing population of high school graduates. We're now entering a phase where there's going to be a plateau. So this number isn't going to grow on its own anymore. It'll have to grow with more purposeful work. I will say there is other good news. I mean, one, we do have an increasing percent of Missourians with that credential. The other good news is that students are voting with their feet and they're making smart choices about what to major in. So if you think as a state about, what kinds of fields we think we need more people to be educated in, students really are choosing kind of vocationally oriented programs. So, I mean, some of these increases are crazy, but, health, people majoring in the health professions has more than doubled in the last 10 years. Public services is going up, engineering and technology, life sciences and physical sciences, math, agriculture, computer science. All of those increases are important, and they are closely linked to pretty much every strategic plan that any Department of Economic Development has put out in the last 20 years. We know to prosper as a state that we're going to need more people who are educated in these kinds of areas. The one caveat to that I would say is, for the most part, we're growing in the right areas. There are a couple of areas where there are some declines that I think are troubling. The one that's clearly the most troubling is in education. We're going to need more and more teachers to enter into and stay in education, but that's actually an area where the number of graduates is declining. Computer science also looks like it's down dramatically, but I think that's in some way just how it's categorized. You guys work in a world where you have codes that are important in terms of figuring out, what people are doing and what they're qualified for. We also live in a code-driven world. And so I think what's actually happening in computer science isn't really a decline in the number of students who are majoring in it. It's just a decline who are majoring in a particular code. So the overall numbers are better than they look. The problem for this comes when you start doing something like trying to fill out a competitive application to bring Amazon to the state. And even though anecdotally we hear from our presidents, chancellors, academic leaders that more students are choosing to enter occupations or to major in things that will prepare them to work in computer science, it doesn't show up in our numbers. And so Amazon takes a look at our application. They're like, we don't think you have the people. When what we're hearing is that actually we do have the people. They're just not getting the credential that makes it clear to Amazon or to other big employers that we've got the people. We spend a lot of time, and particularly in preparation for the Talent for Tomorrow task force that I'm working on with Marty and with Rob Dixon at DED, just thinking about, what is the future really going to look like? The idea for Talent for Tomorrow is that it will be a pretty big and future-oriented look about what the state of Missouri is going to need to be competitive in the future. So I should confess that part of this thinking came from attending a conference last summer. I'm always wary about going to a conference, attending one session, and completely changing changing your entire worldview, but I did. But I confess it, so at least we all know that I've done it. So I went to a conference last summer where one of my colleagues from another state talked about, kind of this invisible wave that most states aren't really planning for in terms of the impact of trade, technology, the increasing ubiquity of the internet, just the massive changes that are happening faster than they've ever happened before in human life. And how will we as a state, as a nation, as a world prepare for this entirely different environment? And so based on that one life-changing hour-long presentation, and I have to say that guy's presentation was bananas. He had been formerly in military intelligence, and there was all this this is top secret, you can't tell anybody, but then he would show it on a slide, and there were things all over every slide. It was pretty bananas, but like I said, it changed my life, so take that for what it's worth. Anyway, so I came home from that conference, and also in preparation for this conversation with Marty and with Rob, and started doing quite a bit of reading about just kind of what do smart people think about the future. Is this idea that we're going to be facing these crazy, dramatic changes real, or is it just, this one crazy guy kind of in a fever dream at a conference? There are lots of smart people who think that our world is going to change very, very dramatically and very, very rapidly. So this guy, Klaus Schwab, is the founder of the World Economic Forum, which if you ever hear anything about Davos, there's a group of people, really smart, rich people who get together every year. I was not invited again this year, which I find to be very hard to believe. Anyway, so these smart people get together. He's kind of the head of all the smart, rich people in the world. And I thought this quote was really interesting as we think about how we're preparing people for tomorrow. So this quote is, "We stand on the brink of a technological revolution that will fundamentally alter the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before." So I can't quite decide if I believe this or if I think it's maybe a little bit grandiose. But I do think it asks me the question, what do I as a leader within state government do to prepare for this possibility? Do I just continue to come to work every day and do exactly the same thing that I did the previous day and something that's very similar to what my predecessor did and his predecessor before him? Or is it my responsibility to think harder about the future and what we should do to prepare? I think it's the latter. I think we have a responsibility to try to think about the future and prepare for it to the extent possible. So, some more kind of reading about what do smart people think is going to happen. This is the sort of good news slide. So the Pew, which is a Pew Center, which does a lot of research on kind of opinion topics among the American people, asked a whole bunch of smart people, leaders throughout lots and lots of sectors, kind of what do they see in terms of the future? Will robots and artificial intelligence take all of our jobs? Will they create more jobs than they destroy? So I think this is sort of a good news slide. This says that about half of them think that more jobs will be lost to technology, and about half of them think that that more jobs will be created than lost. That's not bad, especially compared to the way a lot of people view the possibility of automation or just the changes that are going to happen in manufacturing and retail, lots of other segments of the economy. I think there is a very real possibility that more jobs will be created than lost, and that's the possibility that we're preparing for as we ask ourselves about the workforce of tomorrow. So what does this mean for higher education? I mean, the schools that I work with are thinking really hard about how to, frankly, succeed in the long term, particularly in a state that has flexible levels of funding for higher education. They don't necessarily increase from one year to the next. They're not necessarily tied to workforce goals. All of the schools in the state are competing for the same pool of students, which I already noted is currently at a plateau. And so they're really at a moment where they're having to examine their basic model and identity and ask, how do we succeed and thrive in this future? And so they're thinking a lot more about credentials other than just a bachelor degree or just an associate degree than they have in the past. So one thing I think when I talk with groups in higher ed circles with presidents and chancellors and trustees, I think we have to predict that durable skills will matter the most. So those kinds of skills that you take with you from one job to the next, or even just from one position within your organization to the way it's defined the next day. So these durable skills, I think, are going to matter the most in the long run. One joke I always tell that I think is funny and no one else does is that you will need critical thinking, communication, the ability to work well with others, whether you want to run for office, run your own small business, or run from the robot that took your job. If you went to school, you probably remember suffering through general education. Nobody explained probably what the point of general education is. General education is actually something that's supposed to be like the meat of what you learn in higher education. Your reading, your writing, comprehension, how you work, how you solve problems, critical thinking. And those are kind of the skills and the box or the basket of skills that employers take as a proxy for, like, you're basically a pretty smart person. I assume if you got this degree, then you probably can read and write. You have some level of persistence because you've made it through either an associate or a bachelor degree. So, I will always remember an experience I had with Amy and Julie Gibson where we worked so hard on work keys. And with work keys and with a bunch of the other credentials that we were trying to get employers to embrace in Missouri, particularly in manufacturing, part of the challenge was that the employers didn't always understand what the credential meant. It took a while. It took a lot of education. And that doesn't mean that's not worthwhile, but I came away with the conclusion that I think possibly the bachelor degree is probably the most widely recognized credential of value from the employer's perspective. And so when people talk about, like, history major, why? What are you going to do with that? Well, you can do a whole lot of things based on this. And so I think it's important as we approach this workforce conversation to recognize that these durable long-term skills are going to be very important and that people are going to need to change over the course of their professional lives. Oh boy, this is a whole lot of slides that say the same thing that I just said. When we look at the jobs that have grown in the last 20 years, the jobs that have grown the least are those that require physical skills. So we know, and I'm sure you do too from the people that you serve, that if what you do is mostly done with your hands, there's a chance that it's already been outsourced, and there's an even better chance that it will be in the future. I grew up with a lot of people who didn't have college degrees, and many of them were very skilled carpenters or, these other kind of things that they did with their hands. This will increasingly be work that disappears because anything that's repetitive can be performed through automation and more inexpensively. So the jobs that have grown the least are those that require physical skills. The ones that have grown the fastest are those that require both social and analytical skills. So those kind of things that no matter how hard a robot tries, they really can't. Those are the ones that have grown in the last 20 years, and I think we should expect that they'll continue to. This is also from the Pew Center. It talks about tough to teach intangibles, such as emotional intelligence, curiosity, creativity, adaptability, resilience, and critical thinking will be the most highly valued in the future. So I also say, in a perfect world, everyone would have lots of time to get an associate degree, a bachelor degree, a master's degree, a doctoral degree. The reality is that we have lots of needs that aren't met by those long-term training programs, and there are lots of ways that higher education institutions aren't great at helping people get through those programs. We're doing lots of work at the state level to try to improve and straighten that pathway. But the reality is that short-term and skills-based training will always be equally important as these longer-term programs. The reason for that are several-fold. One of my colleagues from the community college world said something once that's always stuck with me, and that was that sometimes you got to make a living before you can make a life. Not everyone has time to take all of this, not everyone has time to make it through a bachelor degree or even an associate degree. And so from an individual perspective, we're always going to need to make sure that we have opportunities for people to gain the skills they need to get back into the workforce right away. So from the individual perspective, that's certainly true. It's also extremely true from the employer's perspective. Anytime you see any kind of report from our Chamber of Commerce, or anytime you talk with any of the major employers in the state, or frankly even some of the small employers, they all say the same thing, and that's that they struggle to find workers who are ready for the job. And that's true in a couple of different ways. One, they often observe that people don't come to the workforce with the work ethic that they need to succeed in the workforce. But also we hear that they don't come to work with some of the more technical skills they need. There are basic things that are missing. And so we're always going to need to have short-term training programs that prepare people to do these very particular jobs. I do another kind of piece of information to absorb is the reality that more and more people are saying, this is another study from the Pew Center, more and more people are recognizing that they're going to have to continue to educate themselves throughout the course of their life. It used to be the case that a bachelor degree was a bank that you could draw on through the course of your entire professional career, and that very rarely would people need to go back and seek additional training or more skills. We are seeing, with the increasing pace of change in the workplace and the world, an increasing recognition that everyone is going to have to be learning things every day. And there is a variety of ways that people think they're going to have to do that. I don't think I included that slide. There are lots of different ways people can do that. One, people recognize they may have to go to school to get another degree. People know they may have to learn things from their coworkers. They may have to seek out resources online so that they can teach themselves. But there is a growing recognition that we're all going to need to be learning constantly. And I think from the higher education perspective, there's a niche here for people who got a bachelor's degree in one thing, and then it turns out, they need a fairly short-term bump up to be able to do a different kind of job. The last thing I would say is in higher education, I don't know what your dichotomies in your work world are, but in higher education, there's always this dichotomy between short-term and long-term. Community colleges always want to say, like, we need more community college training, we need more certificates, we need more associate degrees. And the four-year people are like, no, we need a lot more of these bachelor degrees. We need both. There's no reason to say that we need more of one kind or the other. So we've got to be prepared to do both. And we've got to be prepared to do so across the state. There are lots of different populations in Missouri that are not particularly well served by higher education institutions. They don't have access, or if they do have access, it's not frankly convenient enough for them to take the time to make it through. I am from one of the low-educated counties there. This is an educational attainment map from Merrick. It shows the percent of people who have bachelor degrees in each county. Lighter is less, darker is more. So I can tell you, I have a very clear memory of my parents trying to get higher education as adults. And it was extremely hard, even for pretty smart people with moderate financial means, but more than nothing. It's very hard. Our systems aren't set up to serve folks in rural communities particularly well. For other reasons, we're also not serving some people in urban communities particularly well, and so that's a major focus of the coordinating board's work. So I don't know how relevant these will be for you, but these are the questions that I ask educators when I talk with them about workforce. One, I think they have to be very clear in the value to the student. One is whatever they're learning in higher education, will it allow them to get a better job, earn more money, and to keep their current job? Is it something they can't teach themselves? I'll be really interested to see if, as the internet continues to evolve, and as the generation that was born with the internet literally in their hands, like as toddlers, how much can they really not teach themselves? I think we're going to find out. I have an 11-year-old daughter who routinely teaches herself things from the internet. I don't know that we'll get to a point where you can assemble the total package of a degree through things you teach yourself online, but I think it's possible. So is it something they can't teach themselves? The third one is one that not everybody agrees with, but I think it's important to consider, and that question is, does the value of the credential depreciate faster than the time it takes to pay it off? So if you get a short-term certificate and it costs $45,000, and by the time you're 4 years into repayment, the thing you've been trained to do has been outsourced to Mexico, you have not made a good investment. And if you're using state money or federal money to pay for that investment, someone has not invested state or federal money very well either. So I think that's an important thing to consider as well. And one to balance against, as I said, the need for short-term training. And we need people to fill jobs now. People need to get a job tomorrow. But we do have to weigh kind of the long-term cost and benefit. In terms of the employer, as schools are starting to think more about alternative certification or things other than a degree, like basically how can they get the customer in the door one more time, or how can they serve a new customer. But they have to remember the employer has to understand what it means, and that's as I said earlier with WorkKeys, there was a lot of education required to get employers to understand what WorkKeys meant. Even with manufacturing, even the kind of credentials that are pushed hard at the national level, local manufacturers often have absolutely no idea what those credentials mean. And so you can try to get people into those programs, but what the employer really wants to know is, do you have the skills? And they don't necessarily understand that the credential is a short-term or kind of a proxy for having those skills. Does the employer believe the skills behind the credential have value? I mean, is it something they need? Does the employer believe that, if a student has a credential from a higher education institution, it means more than if they didn't have the credential? Is it something the student might have been able to teach themselves? And then maybe more important is, does the employer know that it's more than a certificate of attendance? There are a lot of education programs that are offered not for credit, particularly kind of at the master's and above level, that it just doesn't mean that much to an employer. There is a whole kind of category of that I see sometimes on resumes. I'm like, so you had $3,000 and 2 weeks off and you got this thing. I mean, it doesn't really mean that much. So it's important to understand the value of the credential. From the higher education perspective, I can't emphasize enough how hard this is. I mean, even just having a conversation about higher education partly being about workforce development, like that's a hard conversation to have in the room with a lot of faculty. They think that higher education is about something else. There is a growing understanding of the value of talking about employability with undergraduate students, but it's a hard conversation. So getting faculty involved, as they absolutely have to be in this kind of shift, is a hard one. I think these changes are likely to really affect the way the higher education institutions do their business. So that's going to be a hard one too. So that's a little bit about kind of my thoughts on workforce development. In terms of what the Department of Higher Education does to help meet these needs, we're in kind of a weird situation. People expect a lot of the Department of Higher Education. They want us to be able to make the colleges and universities do things, but the colleges and universities in the state are very specifically self-governing. We don't govern them. We can't really tell them what to do, so we can make suggestions. But what we really can do is build policies that bend their behavior in the ways that meet state goals. We do that through performance funding, other funding recommendations. We do it through the state financial aid model, which Mardy is helping to kind of rethink right now. So we do our best to do the magic and try to bend people in the right direction, but they all are constantly aware of having to make it work from their perspective as well and meet the needs of their constituents. So that's a very fast talk. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Always wondered about the Department of Higher Education.
Any questions for Commissioner Mulligan?
Well, thank you so much. Like I said, we're excited about Talent for Tomorrow, and particularly about the partnership that it represents with DWD. I hope that this won't be the last time you hear from me, and I'm grateful for your partnership. Thank you.
Thanks again, Commissioner Mulligan. So we're going to switch decks real quick and jump into, I know I'm standing between you and lunch, but I think this is really important that I get a chance to go through this with you. So Talent for Tomorrow, you heard Commissioner Mulligan talk about it. I've talked about it a little bit, but what the heck is it, right? So I want to make sure that we had an opportunity to discuss this. So Talent for Tomorrow is really, it's a component of Best of Midwest, and it's a key part of what Best Midwest is hoping to accomplish. So to become Best Midwest, we have to understand how to cultivate resiliency in Missouri's labor market. We are 56% of DED. So you can't transform DED. You can't become Best Midwest from a DED perspective without partnering with us and working with us. And so we're a key part of that. And I think that, Director Dixon speaks to that daily, and I hope that you feel just and understand just how important the work we do is to DED's broader mission. So kind of an offshoot of Best of Midwest is a project that we're running called Talent for Tomorrow. And some of you may remember last year there was an innovation task force led by Hawthorne Association or Foundation. There was a transportation task force. There's been a number of task force. Well, this is Missouri's task force to focus on Missouri's labor market. And so it's being driven by Director Dixon and Commissioner Mulligan at the cabinet level. It's being led by Hawthorne Foundation to make sure we're engaging with private sector, and of course DEWD. We are at the hub of all of this because we are where the rubber hits the road, and we will be the ones who pull this together. But the three legs of our stool in workforce development really are all about employment, training, and education. And so you just heard from Commissioner Mulligan talk about the education piece. That's half of the story. The other half is the K-12 piece, of course. But how do we really, truly, not just talk about it, but truly connect and align education, higher education, with employment and training, and employment being, the economic development activity, and training really being our workforce development activity. So that's what Talent for Tomorrow sets out to do. So this initiative really has a core mission, and first is to develop a statewide strategy for workforce development. Missouri has never had a strategy specifically for workforce development. We've never had a strategy to align workforce with education, with economic development. And so in about 98 days, we're going to have one, and I'm really excited about that. We've always been maybe a paragraph or two in the state's economic plan. Maybe there's a reference in Department of Higher Education or DESE's plans, but never have we had a central focus on workforce development. So through this process, we've engaged with PwC, and that's why I was late, because I was actually with PwC, and they're helping us put together some quantitative information to help us shape and design our statewide strategic plan. But we're going to be going around the state and holding regional meetings and engaging with our regional partners to learn, data says this, but what is the reality of some of these things? So how do we match qualitative and quantitative data together to get a full understanding and scope, and so we can truly shape a strategic plan for workforce development? I think, what this will help us do will help us increase our understanding, create solutions, and address gaps coming between those three legs, the employment, training, and education pieces. So I think this initiative, and I truly believe this initiative, is one of the most critical things we can do to build the next generation of Missourians, to really position Missouri in a way in which our labor market can become resilient, our state can grow, we can recruit, retain talent in Missouri, and Missouri will become best in the Midwest. So what are we trying to do as a result of the mission? We're going to come out with some real specific strategies and measures for meeting current and future workforce needs of Missouri's economy and target sectors. So part of Best Midwest is we're going to have an economic analysis. Economic analysis is going to say these are the legacy sectors in Missouri that are strong and will continue to be strong in the next generation, the next 15, 20 years. These are the emerging sectors that we're not focusing on yet, but we better start paying attention to, because this is where we're heading. And this is the skills, the training, the certifications that we're going to need. What does economic mobility look like? How does broadband play into this? How does access to transportation and housing and other resources? All workforce development things that we talk about daily, how does it plug into really cultivating resiliency in Missouri's economy and labor market? Aligning secondary and post-secondary education organizations with our public workforce system and with our private sector, right? No longer each of us kind of doing this in a vacuum, but really sitting down together and saying, what's the good, bad, and ugly? How do we get through this together, and how do we truly put this out? We're going to be told real quickly that our baby is ugly, and we need to be willing and able to accept that and then move on. Get beyond the bureaucratic egos, get beyond the bureaucratic silos, and really tackle these core issues and challenges facing our state and try to make a difference. And I think that's the goal here, and that's a key part of our end game. And then as we do that, we'll build flexibility and resiliency in Missouri's training and education systems, because we need to be more adaptive and more sustainable. We need to allow for local innovation to occur, but also connect it at the state level so we can scale it across the state. We're doing good stuff, but we don't always know what we're doing. I learn something new every day that I thought I understood what someone was doing really great in a part of the state, and then I learned that another part of the state's doing something just as exciting. And so how do we connect those things together? Missouri is unique and special in that we do have a diverse economy. We have our 14 workforce regions and our 10 economic regions. That's great. Let's own that, but let's find a way to connect those things together, because you can have strong spokes, and I think we do, but if your hub isn't connected to those things, you're going to miss. And I think that's really what we've done over the years is failed to have a strong hub. So we're going to establish a model for retaining existing talent and attracting new talent into Missouri. We know that Missouri's population is kind of flatlined. Our population certainly is aging. Our most productive part of our workforce, the 22 to 44-year-olds, are in decline. We know these are national trends, but these are even more exemplified in Missouri. And so we need to work on these things. Where are the areas of hope that we see happening? How are we impacting labor force participation? How are we getting more people off the sidelines and into work, whether it's through our reentry initiatives, through vocational rehabilitation initiatives, through Skill Up, some of these other projects that we have. How are we helping individuals find that pathway to sustainability? And how are we increasing labor participation and productivity as a result? So as we do these things, to keep it ongoing, we're going to have to really understand our data, and data can't be done in a snapshot. And any of us can go onto BLS or get census data or go to our great friends at Merrick who have wonderful data, but the data is backwards, right? It has a lag to it, and it tells us where we were at a certain point in time about 12 to 18 months ago. But how do we take that data, how do we identify other data that we're not currently looking at, and build some models that will allow us to make real-time decisions that are driven really by science, by using data to drive these decisions, both qualitative and quantitative, right? Not just macroeconomic numbers, but also, what's actually happening in our communities across the state. What policies actually might make sense on paper, but don't make sense in reality when it comes to implementation. And how do we go through this process of continuous improvement to continue to refine ourselves and to come back to that cultivation of resiliency in our market. I'm really excited about the data piece that's going to come out of this, and again, that's where PwC, our consultant team, is really going to help us have some models that we'll put forward. And you're going to start seeing dashboards and start seeing things come up, and we're going to be talking about these things. And we may have a dashboard that makes a lot of sense to look at today, but it may not make sense 60 days from now to look at that same dashboard. And so we may have to come up with new metrics and new things but the flexibility in that is going to be extremely important. That's how you become dynamic. So who are we trying to reach here with this? Obviously there's us, but outside of our Jeff City bubble, really first is employers. How do we engage better with employers and truly understand what their needs are, both our employers here in Missouri today, where 73% of all of our projects with expansion, with economic development come as expansion projects. But then how do we understand also on these attraction projects, how are we having the right talent? And maybe we do, right? So maybe we do have some great stories across the state, but maybe we're not telling that story well enough so that these businesses are choosing other states because they just don't fully understand what Missouri has to offer. So how do we align ourselves to attract prospective employers, but also help our current employers grow and be more productive? I had a talk last week with an employer in Sedalia, and they are lifelong Missourians, very passionate about Missouri, but they just opened a facility in Texas because they could not get local and regional support for the workforce they needed. They couldn't get local and regional support from the assets and the partnership groups in those regions to help them solve the problem they had. And so they had to go elsewhere. Does that mean that we're not doing our job? It does, but it comes back to that whole why piece. Most likely we have everything that Texas has. Maybe we're just not aligning it. Maybe we're not connecting it together. So those are the sort of things we want to look at and work closely with our employers. Employees, understanding that the unemployed and the underemployed will always continue to be a core component of our focus, but more and more so, how do we expand that into our workers now? If you think about our workers now, we have about 3 million of them in Missouri, and they've been trained, they've gone to work, but then time has transpired. So, who in here has an iPhone? Probably easier to ask who doesn't have an iPhone, or smartphone, rather, if you're a Samsung person or those other things. So January of 2007, before that, those things didn't exist. So if you've had a job and you've been working prior to January 2007, think about how much technology has accelerated and changed since then. And if you haven't been trained and been invested in and skilled up, so to speak, then you're going to be behind already. Think how many new issues of Microsoft have we had since then? How many changes in our communication systems have we had since then? So we have to be honest. We have to take an honest look at how do we help our incumbent workforce. It's not just okay that they have a job. How do they keep that job? How do they grow in those jobs? How do we keep Missouri's labor market resilient as a result? Education, K-12. Post-secondary, training providers, getting us all on the same page, getting us aligned. We've talked about that. And then government, right? Getting the key players at the table at the local level, the regional level, and of course the state level to make sure everyone fully understands what we're facing and what our approach is going to be. So exposing them to the quantitative data that we find, giving each group as key stakeholders a voice in this to help us shape the statewide strategic plan to help us be a part of the ongoing continuous improvement that we do there, and to give us the qualitative analysis that we need to make sure that we have a full scope of our labor market in Missouri. That's really what we're going to focus on. So some stakeholder groups, I talked through them, but the way this is just designed, executive leadership, this effort's led as a joint task force from Commissioner Mulligan and Director Dixon. And then we have a working group, which I'm the chair of our working group, which consists of members from the Department of Agriculture, Missouri Chamber of Commerce, Division of Workforce Development. We have DESE, Career and Technical Education, that is a part of that group. And that's kind of the group that's kind of convening and putting all of this together under the leadership of Commissioner Mulligan and Director Dixon. And then we have a full task force of over 80 private sector leaders that we're convening. They'll be a part of regional meetings that we're going to have across the state. I'll have a slide for that in a minute, as well as part of the Best of Midwest Summit, which you've heard Director Dixon talk about, to truly give us feedback and to be our steering committee, help drive us. Are we looking at the right things? Are we missing something? Are you missing something? Because it's easy to say, well, if they did this different, they be in government and education, then all of our problems will be solved. Well, employers have a role to play here too. And so it really takes all of us to look in the mirror and say, what is our job going to be? And let's get past and through this together. So task force meetings, we're going to go around the state. We have a kickoff. We're going to formally kick this off on June 8th. Hopefully, without any big changes, Governor Parsons is going to kick this off at the Hawthorne meeting on June 8th for us, which I'm really excited about. And then we will have regional meetings across the state. We'll be in St. Louis, Cape Girardeau, Columbia, Springfield, Kansas City. Each of you, local regions, you're invited to be at the regional events that as they come to your area. Central office staff, the closest one to you is going to be Columbia. You'll be invited to participate in those events as they come up. And then we'll have a final report out, wrap-up meeting will happen in mid-August. And all this builds up to the Governor's Conference, where really we'll roll all out the Best of Midwest, the Talent for Tomorrow, and the kind of the foundation of our new strategic plan for workforce development at the Governor's Conference in Kansas City, September 5th through the 7th. So it's going to be a pretty big 100-day sprint. We got a lot going on, and we're going to be traveling, crisscrossing the state, having these events and getting feedback. And the calendar kind of walks you through it, but it kind of just talks about when these things are going. You can see there's different flows here, and there's key groups of when we engage with the full task force, what work the working group has. You'll see it lines well with Best of Midwest. We are an integral part of the Best of Midwest Summit on June 27th. And so talent for, again, workforce talent is extremely critical to economic development, and so it's a critical part of Best of Midwest. And then our consultant team, PwC, who was hired separately on, they won both RFPs, but they're doing Best of Midwest, but they also have a different team, kind of crossover, but different people, more specific to workforce development, that are working with us on the workforce development piece. So that's what Talent for Tomorrow is. I wanted to make sure you guys were aware of it. Rob and I have been kind of traveling around, meeting with the different stakeholder groups before we do the big road show. But we've engaged with team has been exposed to this, and they're on board. We've met with community colleges and technical college leaders, training providers. We've met with all the presidents and chancellors of the colleges. Commissioner Mulligan, I know, has been working with the coordinating board and with the university leaders. And so it really is not something that we want to make Missouri's best kept secret. It's not something that we want to do in a vacuum. We literally want to drag everybody involved and get everybody at the table and be exposed to this as we can, because the more minds that touch this, the more experiences and perspectives that touch this, the stronger we will be as we actually roll out some deliverables on the outside. So that's Talent for Tomorrow. Any questions specific to this? So your role in this is big, right? This is all, some of you are on the working group for Best of Midwest. We'll be tackling some of these issues in the innovation teams. Some of you will be involved and encouraged to participate in the regional events. So this is not a wait and hear from us of what happens next. This is, we need to hear from you. We need your involvement and participation and leadership in this. So I want you to know that you're an integral part of this. Okay, well, that's all I have for today. Is there anything anyone else has? I know everyone's hungry. I still did pretty good getting this in by 10 after, so I'm happy. So Okay, we probably will not meet again until August because it's summer and there's a lot going on, but we'll probably shoot for an all-staff in early August. Okay? All right, thanks.